It was during my trip to PAX West that I was able to give Long Gone Days a try. The person showcasing it was very welcoming and I was drawn in by the anime character designs, so I decided to give it a try. At that time, I only got to play it for around 15 minutes, but it was enough for me to request I eventually be given a key. Seeing as how that ended up happening, I was able to play all of Long Gone Days. Unsurprisingly, I was happy with the cool artwork right from the start. It shouldn't be a surprise that I'm a huge anime fan, so when I see that kind of artwork featured in a game, I'm inclined to give it a try. It was really just the character design that was anime-based. In-game, it was more about pixel graphics, but just about everywhere else you could see how much anime influenced the look of Long Gone Days. I was especially happy with the artwork during dialogue. It not only showed off the great character designs, but it showed different sides of the characters. How they were showcased during cutscenes depended on what was being discussed, and how they were reacting. I wouldn't go so far as to say that this was full-on animation, but it was nice that effort went into making it more than what it could have been. Despite having greatly enjoyed the artwork during the cutscenes, at one point I started to realize that there was a lot of dialogue. It was much more than I was expecting. LGD is characterized as a JRPG, and while it largely comes off that way, it was really more of a visual novel. There are plenty of RPG elements in LGD, but with how lengthy some of the cutscenes were and how they played out, I felt that affected the gameplay and my overall experience with LGD. There are some JRPGs that make use of lengthy cutscenes and exposition dumps, but they tend to find the balance between that and gameplay. With LGD, I was at times left thinking, just let me play. It might have to do with the fact that I constantly want to be in control and doing things in a game, but I didn't feel as drawn into the cutscenes as the devs may have wanted me to. I will, however, say that even though they sometimes came off as too much, they managed to accomplish multiple different things. Showcasing a game's artwork is one thing, but at the same time, the dialogue/cutscenes wasn't all filler. It made you care about the multiple different characters that made up your immediate party or antagonists. It also had a lot to say in regards to modern events currently playing out, such as war, large refugee migrations, and xenophobia. At no point did I feel that the devs were shoving their beliefs down my throat, but based on how these moments played out, it was easy to understand their points of view. LGD isn't the first or the last that makes you care about its characters, but it's still worth mentioning because other RPGs fail to accomplish this. It's either due to poor writing or not enough being done to make you care. For some, RPGs are all about grinding and taking part in turn or action-based combat, but for me, the story is a big part of the RPG experience. For years I've thought to myself that RPGs are some of the best games when it comes to storytelling and taking risks with how you want to go about telling the story you have to tell. I'm sure that it's probably coming off as if I'm aggrandizing the story that LGD has to tell, but that's not my point. My point is to say that I enjoyed this part of LGD because it made me feel more engaged with what the characters were experiencing, and that's important. If your game can manage to make me care or get lost in the story it has to tell, then it's managed to accomplish something that all games aren't capable of doing. This eventually spilled over into LGD's gameplay. There were multiple examples of the story affecting the gameplay, but one that stood out to me involved an untrained reporter deciding to fight. There were multiple moments involving civilians feeling pushed towards violence as a way of defending themselves and their beliefs, but I like how this was seen during combat. Seeing as how this reporter is an untrained civilian, it makes sense that she'd feel uncomfortable using a gun. Some of the other characters even told her that she didn't have to get involved like this if she wasn't fully up for it, but she still decided that's what she wanted to do. As a result of that, you can't aim when it's her turn in combat. With the other characters, you could aim at different body parts of enemies. You could aim for headshots, which I felt were too successful, but they'd lead to causing more damage. You could aim for arms, which would lead to paralysis, or you can aim for torsos as a safer/more general way of causing damage. It's because each body part that you decided to attack had its pros and cons. Headshots led to more damage being inflicted, but there was a greater chance of missing. To a lesser extent, it was the same with arms. I'd be lying if I said that being able to frequently land headshots didn't help me, but I still felt that this could have been better balanced. You could say that the reason for this is that two of the main characters in LGD are trained soldiers, but at the end of the day, the reality of the situation is that this part of combat was imbalanced. Another issue I had with combat was how there was a delay between deciding to attack and actually attacking. The sequence of events took much longer, and I felt that added more time to the game than was necessary. At first that was just an annoyance, but during boss fights there were more issues. I felt that they were much longer and tedious. It's because regular battles really didn't prepare you for how boss fights would be. It makes sense that the boss fights would be longer, seeing as how you're facing off against stronger enemies with more abilities, but sometimes this went beyond that. It didn't help that they'd take less damage, and they sometimes had healers. You could be focusing on just the boss, but just as you thought you were towards the halfway point of the battle, they'd end up getting healed. The point isn't to fast forward through these battles, as is possible in some modern-day RPGs, but I felt that they could have been better managed. On the bright side, it was nice that you could afflict bosses with status effects. For years I've been used to RPGs where spells such as poison or other debuff abilities would do nothing against bosses. In LGD, that wasn't the case. It was nice being able to cause paralysis, bleed, blindness, or in general, lower the defenses of bosses. This didn't make the boss battles go as quickly as I would have liked, but it was nice to know that this was actually doable. I'm sure that I'm coming off as a very impatient person, but it's because RPGs have parts that are very repetitive and sometimes straight up tedious. It took me around 7 or 8 hours to beat LGD, so you can imagine how much of that time went into battles being drawn out. This was especially bad when status attacks were used against you. It's because the game would literally go through the effort of letting you know that each individual character was affected by a spell. It would have been easier to just say, your party has been affected with bleed, but that wasn't the case. Like I said before, this just added more time in an unnecessary way. Despite having been largely influenced by LGD's artwork, I ended up thinking greatly of its music. Overall, it was very atmospheric. During the intro, I was also left thinking that the music was very emotional. I'm not breaking new ground by stating this, but great music in an RPG will help push things to the next level. A great game is made possible by the sum of its individual parts, so if something is lacking, one or more things may end up underperforming. That wasn't the case with LGD and its music. It wasn't to the point where I was drawn to tears during emotional moments that were reinforced by the music, but it was well handled to the point where it was worth bringing up. I went into playing Long Gone Days expecting it to be like RPGs I've previously played. I'd say that's both good and bad. It over-delivered in some ways, such as with the story involving modern-day events, but it also underperformed due to having small yet noticeable issues pile up. I don't think that it's the kind of game that'll be enjoyed by the typical RPG fan, but that's not entirely a bad thing. What I mean is that by delivering an experience that slightly strays from the typical path that other RPGs had gone down, it's possible to attract a broader audience. Long Gone Days doesn't deliver a hardcore RPG experience, but it does enough to satisfy most RPG fans, and give casual fans a taste of what RPGs have to offer. If I were to sum up Long Gone Days, I'd say that it's a chill RPG. At times its story might hit too close to home, but that shouldn't be a surprise, seeing as how most art is a reflection of the time in which it was made. I don't think die-hard turn-based RPG fans will be fully pleased, but it does more than enough to warrant a try. Parts of it were pretty slow and it was longer than I thought it'd be, but I had fun, and I was generally satisfied with the overall experience. How do you feel about games making use of modern-day events in their stories? Would you be turned away from an RPG that may be meant to appeal more to casual fans? What are your thoughts in regards to how turn-based combat in RPGs should be approached? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share, and if you're up for it, become a patron. Thank you very much for watching.